All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep into Irish literature, exploring how two writers, Louis MacNeice and Elizabeth Bowen, grappled with questions of identity. You ever feel like there are these invisible forces holding you back?
Oh, absolutely. Kind of like invisible nets, as James Joyce put it.
Yeah.
They can be anything, really. Your nationality or even the language you speak.
Definitely. Even your upbringing can feel that way. Sometimes it feels like strength, but sometimes, limiting.
Exactly. And for MacNeice and Bowen, being Anglo-Irish added another layer to that. They were born in Ireland right before huge political shifts. Imagine being part of a minority within a country already struggling with its own identity.
So they weren't fully Irish in some people's eyes, but they were outsiders to the British establishment as well. A complicated net to navigate for sure.
Right. And to understand their views, we need to unpack this whole Anglo-Irish thing. Essentially, they descended from English settlers. They'd held a privileged position in Ireland, but by MacNeice and Bowen's time, the political scene was changing drastically. Ireland was fighting for independence.
So they were caught in between, straddling two worlds, never fully belonging to either. Must have made them think hard about identity.
Absolutely. And that unique perspective plays out in their work. We'll look at three MacNeice poems: Autobiography, Valediction, and London Rain. Each one tackles these nets in its own way.
Let's start with Autobiography. It struck me how MacNeice uses a childlike voice, simple rhymes, to talk about some pretty heavy stuff, contrasting innocence with these big experiences, right?
It makes you wonder why a child's voice for trauma, maybe to make us feel that loss of innocence more keenly. Or is it a way to distance himself from the pain?
Maybe he's showing how these nets start early. Even as a child, you feel those constraints of family, upbringing.
Don't forget that chilling line repeating, "Come back early or never come," like a warning beneath those simple rhymes.
It is chilling, like a nursery rhyme gone wrong.
And those simple rhyming couplets, like building blocks, create this sense of order, constraint, like he's trying to impose a form of those difficult emotions.
Like we try to fit difficult experiences into neat boxes, but those boxes can only hold so much.
Exactly. That struggle to contain those powerful feelings is a major theme in MacNeice's work.
Okay, then there's Valediction, MacNeice saying goodbye to Ireland. Not exactly a sentimental farewell, though, is it?
Not at all. It's raw, honest. He uses really vivid imagery, almost violent, like hammer playing in the shipyard, time punched with holes like a steel sheet when describing Belfast.
Not exactly a tourist brochure. It feels raw, almost violent.
And here's where his Anglo-Irish identity comes in. He's critical of Ireland, but there's this deep connection, this love-hate. It's like he's rejecting and embracing those nets of national identity all at once.
And that conflict's even clearer because he says farewell twice in the poem. That push and pull, the struggle to break free, but also that tether to a place that's familiar and suffocating.
Brilliant, the double farewell.
Yeah.
You feel the weight of his decision.
Then we have London Rain. It feels almost whimsical compared to Valediction, but he's still tackling big questions, especially about religion.
The way he uses rain imagery is interesting, this tension between faith and doubt. Rain, a life-giving force, cleansing, maybe even grace, but it can be relentless too, destructive.
Like he's saying, I don't know what to believe anymore, but I'm still searching.
That search for meaning, wrestling with those nets of religion, is in Elizabeth Bowen's work too. We'll be looking at three of her short stories: All Saints, The Apple Tree, and Mysterious Core.
Now, Bowen's known for her unique approach to the short story, master of conveying so much in these short, snapshot-like moments, like she strips away the unnecessary to make it more impactful.
She wasn't afraid to break from convention. And in each of these stories, characters grapple with identity, expectation, often challenging societal norms.
So let's start with All Saints, a church, but there's this darkness, unease in the atmosphere.
Bowen at her best. A setting you expect to be filled with light and hope, she infuses it with ambiguity, doubt.
And the main character, this emotional lady, she's seeking solace, but you get the feeling she's not finding it.
That line, the church was growing very dark. It's simple, but symbolic, like the darkness mirrors her internal struggle.
And her comment about the stained glass windows making one feel so religious and good, almost sarcastic, like she's questioning those feelings.
Exactly. She makes us question, makes us feel that tension between expectation and reality.
Okay, ready for the unsettling atmosphere of the apple tree. Things feel a little off.
The whole story is built on incongruity. This bizarre situation with the apple tree inside the library, these characters who are so oddly matched, full of resentment, Bowen loves to make us feel like something's not quite right.
And the way she describes their relationships, old friendly enemies, mannerless, sexless, so pointed.
Don't forget Simon's obsession with Myra's sleepwalking, that creepy psychological layer.
Which connects to the nets theme, doesn't it? He's trying to control her, even in her unconscious state.
Exactly. Trying to fit her into a box.
Yeah.
And that struggle for autonomy is all over Bowen's work.
Okay, last, Mysterious Core, set during the Blitz. How people cope with trauma, find escape.
Bowen contrasts two ways of coping. Pepita creates this fantasy world, core untouched by war, timeless, ordered, her way of escaping.
Building her own net, but one that protects rather than confines.
Then there's Arthur, facing reality head-on. He sees through the illusion of escape, recognizing those nets can only offer temporary respite.
So Pepita builds a protective net. Arthur refuses any net. Bowen showing us there's no one right way to cope.
Exactly. She doesn't give easy answers. Makes us confront the messiness, the different ways we grapple with fear, loss, and desire for meaning in a world that can feel so chaotic. Like she's saying, even trying to escape, build our own nets, we can't fully outrun those bigger forces.
Both MacNeice and Bowen dealing with that tension, but let's look at their language, how their words, images help them explore those themes.
Sure.
With MacNeice, we talked about the childlike voice and autobiography, but the words themselves. What stands out to you in how he shows those feelings of being trapped or wanting to escape?
Well, even though it's a child's voice, there are these moments of stark, almost unsettling imagery. Black dreams, or that line, come back early or never come. A sense of foreboding, like a shadow over the poem.
Yeah, like those simple words carry a lot of weight, hinting at something bigger, more complex.
Exactly. He uses language to hint at what's not said, creates this unease. Then in Valediction, the language changes completely. More visceral, forceful, like he's trying to shake us out of romantic ideas about Ireland.
Like those lines, hammer playing in the shipyard, time punched with holes like a steel sheet. Not exactly picturesque Ireland.
Not at all. He uses those sensory details, the sound, the image of time being punctured, to create this physical experience for the reader. Wants us to feel the weight of Ireland's history, the violence that's part of it.
And with such strong imagery, he's not just describing Ireland, it's like he's expressing his own conflicted feelings about it, wanting to escape but being tied to it.
Exactly. Like he's saying, this is the Ireland that made me, like it or not. That struggle with personal identity, the forces of history, culture.
Yeah.
That resonates with everyone, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We all have those places, experiences, parts of ourselves we struggle with. How do they fit into who we are?
And that brings us to Bowen. We talked about her innovative storytelling, but her use of language, how does that help her? What sets her apart?
For me, it's her precision. Every word carefully chosen, like she's getting right to the heart of it.
Master of saying more with less. She creates this intensity. Every word matters.
And she's so good at subtext, those layers of meaning beneath the surface, like she's inviting us to read between the lines, come up with our own interpretations.
Exactly. Doesn't give us all the answers, just enough to make us curious.
Can we look at some examples, how she uses language to do that in these stories? In All Saints, what stands out to you about how she shows that religious unease?
Well, one that gets me is that description of the church growing very dark.
Yeah.
So simple, but it sets a tone, not what we expect from a church, right? It becomes oppressive, almost.
And that darkness kind of reflects the woman's inner state, right? She's described as emotional looking.
And then she says the stained glass windows make one feel so religious and good, almost like she doesn't believe it.
Yeah, is she really feeling it or just going through the motions?
Right, that tension between genuine belief and what's expected, a theme in a lot of Bowen's work. Feeling trapped by those nets of tradition.
Okay, the apple tree. So strange. How does Bowen use language to make it so unsettling?
One thing is that feeling of things not fitting together. In the setting and the relationships, that image of the apple tree inside the library, nature invading this ordered space.
And the characters, Lancelot and Mrs. Bettersley, those old friendly enemies. And Simon and Myra, the husband and wife, they seem so out of sync.
Her descriptions of those relationships are so sharp. Remember how she describes Myra? Mannerless, sexless, not considerable as a mother of sons. Harsh, and it shows the power imbalance between them.
And then there's Simon, obsessed with Myra sleepwalking, that creepy element.
Right, trying to control her even when she's unconscious. Like we were saying about those nets, he wants to define her by his own expectations.
And that desire to be your own person, to define yourself, it's something a lot of people struggle with, all those societal pressures.
Absolutely, that pressure to conform. It takes effort to break free.
Okay, last one. Mysterious core. The Blitz. How does Bowen use language to capture the fear and dislocation of wartime?
She contrasts the vastness of the night sky with these claustrophobic interiors. Remember that opening scene, the moon drenching the city, a feeling of being exposed?
And then the cramped flat, Pepita and Callie sharing a bed, the war invading their personal space.
And the way she describes it, Pepita training her limbs not to stray. You can feel the tension, the way their lives are restricted.
Trapped, physically and emotionally. And then Pepita escapes into this imaginary world core. How does Bowen make it both alluring and unsettling at the same time?
She uses these descriptions that appeal to the senses. Timelessness. Corners of stones and the monuments might have been cut yesterday. Perfect order and beauty.
But it feels empty, too.
Yeah. And she describes it as forsaken, not a crack for a weed to grow. Like even escaping reality, we can't fully escape those nets.
Like they're part of us.
And that's what makes MacNeice and Bowen so interesting. They're not afraid to show those complexities. How we deal with loss, fear, trying to find meaning in a world that feels chaotic.
They make us think about our own nets, how we deal with them. Like they're showing us all the different ways we try to make sense of things.
And it's not just what they're saying, it's how they say it. Both MacNeice and Bowen really push the boundaries of poetry and prose.
You mentioned MacNeice experimenting with different poetic forms. Can you give us some examples of how he breaks free from those traditional ways?
Well, he combines personal stuff with social and political commentary. He's not afraid of tough topics like war, doubt. And he's always playing with structure, rhythm, using language in new ways to get a really unique effect.
And Bowen does that with short stories too, right? Takes a traditional form and really strips it down, focusing on these powerful moments that stick with you.
Exactly. She's not interested in doing what everyone else does. She creates something totally new.
That's what modernism is all about, isn't it? Breaking from the past, finding new ways to express this changing world.
Absolutely. MacNeice and Bowen were writing at a crazy time. After war, old values being questioned, everything felt uncertain. And you can see that in their work, that feeling of searching for meaning when the world feels unstable.
So they weren't just being rebellious, they were responding to what was happening around them.
And that's why people still connect with their writing today. Those feelings of being trapped, looking for meaning, wanting connection, those are always there, you know.
Okay, so we've talked about how MacNeice and Bowen challenge those nets, finding their own freedom. But it's not always easy, is it?
No, not at all. You see that in their work. MacNeice, there's this longing in his poems, like he's searching for something he can't quite reach. And Bowen's characters, they're always fighting their inner demons, trying to figure things out in a world that can be pretty harsh.
So it's not like they've got all the answers. They're struggling right along with us.
That's what makes them relatable, right?
Yeah.
They're not talking down to us. They're down in the thick of it with us.
That is comforting. We're not alone in this.
And here's the thing. There's no one right way to do it. MacNeice and Bowen, they show us there are so many paths to freedom. You can create something beautiful, meaningful, even with those limitations that feel like they're holding you back.
Like those limitations, they can actually push you to be creative, to discover yourself.
Exactly. It's all about how you look at it. Those constraints, they're not stopping you. They're chances for growth, for change.
Wow, that's a great point. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Just remember, those nets don't have to control you. You always have a choice, even when it doesn't feel like it. You can stay trapped, or you can find a way to break free.
Sometimes that might mean leaving something behind, like MacNeice leaving Ireland. Or maybe it's finding a new way to express yourself, like Bowen did.
Yeah, just keep searching, keep trying things out, pushing against those boundaries. Because on the other side of those nets, that's where you find real freedom. The freedom to create something truly meaningful, something that shows your unique view of the world.
Amazing. Well, we hope this deep dive has made you want to check out more MacNeice and Bowen. And we hope it's made you think about the nets in your own life, the things that might be holding you back.
And most importantly, that it's giving you that spark, that desire to find your own way to fly.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We'll be back next time with another deep dive.